Welcome everyone. So today we're working with our gouache paint and we're going to be doing part of our tree portrait series. We'll be working on sycamore trees today. I have my photo reference here. This will be available for you guys to download so you can paint along as well. So let's get to it. Alright, so we have all our materials here ready to go. I'm going to be working on a 5" by 8" watercolor paper sketchbook. So it's 140-pound cold press paper. I've got some brushes here. They are synthetic flats. So I have a small one, which is a 1/4 inch. The medium one is a 1/2 inch, and then the biggest one is 3/4 of an inch wide. We have kind of a limited palette for our gouache paint. So I've got a white, and then I've got kind of 2 versions of each primary color. So I've got like a warm and cool for each of my primary colors. Which is a pretty good palette. You can mix most anything with that. So we have titanium white, primary yellow, I have a yellow ochre, a primary red, and then a alizarin crimson, a primary blue, and then the ultramarine blue. Again, I'm pretty comfortable with this palette that I can mix most anything that I need to from that. And then we have our water and paper towels handy. I've got my photo reference and I am ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to start with my medium-sized brush. I just want to get a little bit of water on it. I'm going to do a composition drawing. So I'm getting some watered down yellow ochre here so that I can draw in a basic drawing for where I want everything. I'm starting by kind of just getting a little square on my paper for where I want my image to be. And then I'm going to kind of get the basic shapes in here. So I got my hillside and my pathway that kind of leads in the distance, and then I have a hillside in the background, a little taller one. So those are the main shapes other than our trees. So let's see, for the trees, probably going to be changing this as I'm working, but we'll just get some basic shapes going on. So I'm starting with the tree trunks. We have a taller one over here on the left. But again, I'll definitely be kind of adjusting my shapes and adding to them as I go. All right, let's get a little more water in the mix here. Okay, so let's just block in some big shapes for our foliage on our trees. Kind of just looking at the big clusters at the moment, like the main shapes. When you kind of blur your eyes and look at the subject photo there, you can kind of see some big areas of foliage that really kind of stands out. So we've got some smaller shapes up top here, and then our main shapes towards the middle part of the trunk, a little closer to the bottom. There we go. And let's see, that's pretty good. We're starting to get a nice feel for the composition, kind of just playing with my little shapes here on the upper edge, trying to make them a little lighter, not so heavy. Smaller shapes are good at the top of the tree for that. All right, let's see. Let's go ahead and get some color going here. I want to kind of get started with, let's see, let's start with a green. So we're going to go with yellow ochre and some of that primary blue. So it's kind of a nice warm green, just to, I'm adding water to that definitely, and kind of keeping it thin. I'm just getting my paper covered, my main shapes filled in. So I've got that grassy hill there where the trees are. And then also the little area closer to the corner here. We'll fill that in with that green as well. But just kind of adding a little more water as I get a little higher up into the hill behind the trees. There we go. Okay. Let's switch colors. We are going to, let's go with a little purple. So it's ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and a little bit of white. And I might end up adding a little yellow ochre to that in a minute. Let's see what we have here. It's kind of nice. Let's touch that up just a little bit with some yellow ochre. So I just wanted to gray down the color just a little bit so it's a little more natural looking. So that's better. So this is my hill in the background. It's kind of dark as it's closer to the base of the trees there. And then as it gets closer to the sky, it'll be a little lighter in value. So we'll work on that as we go. But you can kind of see how I'm keeping the paint pretty thin. I'm adding a good amount of water, kind of using this color to designate some of the shadows and shapes in the grass as well. All right, let's go a little lighter. We're gonna go with mostly white with some blue and alizarin crimson there, ultramarine and alizarin. There we go. So I'm getting that lighter part, the higher part of the hill in there. All right, so by adding this purple tone to the hill in the background, it creates a feeling of distance. And you can see it in the photo reference as well. It is a little more bluish, purplish in tone. Atmospheric perspectives, things get a little more blue, a little lighter in value as well as they get further away in space. All right, so I'm gonna add a little more of that yellow ochre in there again. So ultramarine, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre with some water, and I'm just kind of blocking in my roadway here, a little country road, getting a color on there. Definitely gonna be working on that, but kind of just getting rid of that white paper at the moment. Kind of starting to develop the values a little bit. Okay. All right, so this is a good color for the shadow areas. I just want to start to work on the values and kind of determine what's what. So, especially with gouache, you kind of have to go back to your values every once in a while and make sure everything's reading properly. So I already had some shapes in there, but I'm making them darker as I go. So making this a little darker as well. So this is a little area where my tree trunks meet the ground there, in that little shadow area there in the middle. And we'll add a little shadow to our plant over here in the corner as well. So in our painting, the light's coming from the top right corner pretty much and hitting everything. So kind of thinking about that as I'm working on my shapes. All right, so clean brush. Let's see. Let's do kind of more yellow ochre in the mix this time. We're gonna go yellow ochre, alizarin crimson with just a little touch of the ultramarine blue. So this will be a nice color to start to establish our trees a little bit, the main foliage part of the trees. So I want it to be kind of dark to start with. So with gouache, for the most part, I'm working from dark to light with my layers. And let's see. So looking for those main shapes, definitely. Taking my time to kind of look at my photo reference. And let's see, we've got, for our tall tree, we've got kind of a lower area that's a little thicker right about there. And then next to it, there's another thick area there. And then the other tree has, make this a little bit lower. The other tree has another area right next to that, and then that one goes a little lower than the other one in the middle. So you can kind of see how I'm picking out the main shapes of the leaves, because I know there's a lot going on in there. I'm just kind of mixing up that same color I had a minute ago. But I know there's a lot going on in the picture, and you don't want to think about individual leaves when you're doing this. You want to think about kind of like bulk shapes, so big shapes, always starting with the big shapes and working to the small details as you're painting. So I needed to make that a little darker, a little less water in the mix, a little more opaque. There we go. So the less water you add, the more opaque the paint is. If you add too much water, it kind of acts like watercolor, so it's almost like transparent. This is much better now that it's more opaque. All right, let's go a little lighter. We're gonna go with yellow ochre and alizarin crimson. A little bit of water just to make the paint move nicely. And for these leaves up here, definitely want to go a little lighter in color and value so it's not so heavy. And then smaller shapes as well. But I'm going to come back with my sky later on, and I'll be able to kind of work on the silhouette of everything and kind of almost like chunking away at some of the leaves to add some tree holes and things like that. So we'll be able to make this nice and light and airy later on as we keep working on it. There we go. So I wanted to bring that all the way off the top there in the corner. I just think it's a nice composition. Okay. So let's see. We're going to go with that green again, so that yellow ochre with the primary blue mixed in there. So at this point we've kind of got a plan going. Now I just want to really punch up the color a little bit, and less water in my mixtures now, more paint. So same green, but you can see how it looks a lot different with less water in the mix. So just kind of filling in that grassy area that we already designated. And then I'll come back and add some highlights and some shadows and things like that, but starting to get that value reading properly against the other values. Okay, so let's go a little darker. We're going to go with the ultramarine and some yellow ochre. Again, just adding a little bit of water just so the paint moves nicely, but not so much that it's transparent. All right, so this will be my shadow color here for my grassy area. So just kind of reestablishing that shape that I already had, but painted over. There we go. It's a good shadow color for the grass. So also adding a little bit along the roadway there, where there might be a little bit of shadow before it hits the ground, the grass blades. All right. I'm just kind of softening this area over here where the grass meets the hill in the background, just so it's a little more vague. I don't want it to be too harsh of an edge there. I want it to be a little softer. And then adding my little shadow over here and that new coat of green on this little corner here. Okay, looking pretty good. I think the values are starting to read properly. All right, so let's do some white and ultramarine, yellow ochre, and alizarin crimson. So we have kind of a nice color for the roadway is what I'm looking for here. So lots of white in this one. And yellow ochre. So those are the main two colors, and then just a little bit of the other ones in there. So the roadway has like some shadows and sunlight, kind of dappled sunlight on it. So that's the look that I'm trying to capture right now. I'm just making this a little bit brighter. There we go. So that's pretty good. Let's see. I think I like that for now. I might come back to it, but that has a look that I was going for. All right, so let's go ahead and go with a color for the sky. So I'm using the white with the primary blue on a clean brush, and we're gonna mix up a nice color for our sky. I'm adding a little bit of water just so I can get the paint to move nicely. If you don't add any water, sometimes it's a little hard to spread it over a lot of area. But I want to keep this pretty light. And you can kind of notice I'm overlapping that original square that I made for my picture plane. I'm kind of covering that edge a little bit. I like that rough edge of the paint strokes coming all the way out to the white paper. There we go. And filling that in. So I didn't really touch the leaves yet while I was filling the rest of the sky in. because sometimes you can pick up some orange if the paint's still a little bit wet, or if you scrub it a little too much. So I left that part for last as I'm filling in the sky, the area around the trees. So I'm kind of just indicating little clouds or something like that, kind of like we have on our example photo there. But again, I want to keep it subtle. Nice soft sky. Maybe we'll make this a little more vibrant here, just to pop the clouds out a little bit more. There we go. And then we'll tone that down a little bit as well. Okay. So starting to cut away at some of these upper areas of leaves, just by kind of painting right over the top of it, maybe adding little tree holes where you can see through the leaves there. And I'll come back and add more leaves later too, but it's kind of like a back and forth until I'm happy with the shapes here. Which is the fun part about opaque paint. You can kind of keep working on it for the most part until you're happy. Okay, let's go a little lighter. And I just want to work in this area up here. Maybe tone down that blue just a little bit so it's not so much of a difference in value as far as the cloud to the blue sky. And let's see, we'll tone this down as well. And I was playing with my brush strokes. I want it to be interesting, but I don't want it to be distracting, so it's kind of a little dance there. And we'll lighten this area up as far as the weight of those leaves there. It's kind of using the corner of my brush to fill in some little shapes in there, and maybe add some tree holes in that area. Again, definitely coming back with more leaves later on, but starting to commit a little bit more to my shapes as I'm working, to the general structure of the tree. So I won't veer too far off from what I'm doing right now as far as creating my tree. Okay. Let's go a little lighter and kind of try and pop that cloud out just a little bit more without overdoing it. All right, maybe just a little brighter. So it's just kind of a little dance, just kind of playing around with my brushwork and with the values. And I like to do this while it's still wet. Although with gouache, you can always reactivate the paint with a little bit of water after it's already dried, which is nice. You can always come back and do some blending or change your mind later if you need to. But I'm trying to get this just the way I want it before I move on from the sky. It's getting pretty close. I think I need to soften it just a little bit. I'm just going to use a clean brush with just a little bit of water, kind of a damp clean brush right now, just to soften a few brush strokes that might be kind of standing out a little bit too much. And that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and switch gears here. I'm going with some primary yellow and some ultramarine blue, and mixing up a really bright green here just to brighten up this area and get some nice vibrant grassy green colors in there. So instead of the yellow ochre, I was using the primary yellow, which was giving me a much brighter green. All right, let's go with a smaller brush. And let's see, I'm gonna go with some ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson with a little bit of yellow ochre. I want a nice color to start to establish my tree trunks. So we're gonna start out pretty dark. because when they're in shadow, they're almost kind of like a purple color. And then I'll come back and add some highlights later. But for now, we'll start dark. And just kind of starting at the top, and as I'm pulling the brush stroke down, I'm increasing pressure, so the brush stroke gets wider as it goes down towards the bottom of the tree. And maybe we'll pull off a little branch right there. Maybe another one over here. And just kind of playing with the shapes. I don't want to overdo this, but I can, for the most part, get rid of a lot of it if I do overdo it. So this one's a little more curvy, kind of winds its way up. And let's see, we'll do this other one first. There we go. And it has kind of a curly branch that curls behind it and off that way. There's kind of a lot of little tree branches coming off of the root there. But your trees can be different. They don't have to be just like mine. Just kind of playing with shapes at the moment. So whatever works for your painting. Okay. We'll just add a few little branches. I'm trying to be a little lighter on the pressure as you're doing the smaller branches up top, so that you get a thinner brush stroke that way. Okay, and then we'll come back and cover some of this with leaves, so that'll, anything that doesn't work out, you can always kind of get rid of some of it. So just kind of fixing the structure of the bottom of that tree trunk there so that it looks like it's not going to fall over. It's a sturdy tree. All right, let's make that color again. And I'm going to use this to do that shadow at the base of the trees. It's pretty much the same color, the same value at least, and it kind of connects all the trees by being in that same little hill with the shadow there, which I do like for compositional reasons. It looks really good that way. All right, that's working. I'm going to use this to just pop these shadows just a little bit darker in the greens here. So this is still that purplish color with the blue, ultramarine blue, the alizarin crimson, just a little bit of yellow ochre. So we'll mix some of that up again. And we'll put a little bit more of this over here. So adding the shadows really makes that sunlit part of the grass really pop out a little bit more, which is the look that I'm going for with that dappled sunlight. All right, that's coming together pretty good. Okay, so let's see. I'm thinking I like those shapes. I'm going to leave that there for the shadow. And let's do the light parts of the tree trunks. So we're going with white with a little bit of yellow ochre mixed in there. And this color is going to mix with the color of the tree trunk that's already on the canvas as we're working with it, which will work out really nicely for us. So we're not worried about that. All right, so I don't want to do all of this. I just want to be selective with where the light is really hitting those tree trunks. And I'm definitely going to come back and kind of blend this a little bit and tone it down. But for now, that's what I'm looking for here, is those really bright white tree trunks of the sycamores where the light is hitting it. But definitely take your time and make sure you're highlighting the areas you like. Make decisions that work for your painting. And think about where the sun is hitting your shapes, if it's coming from the right side. All right. Starting to look like a sycamore tree. right, so let's see here. We'll go back to some ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and yellow ochre, so that original color we had for the tree trunks. And we're just going to overlap some of these highlights just a little bit, so the colors are going to mix a little bit, and we'll get some nice variations that way. So kind of adjusting my shapes by going back to that shadow color and maybe thinning out some of the highlights here or there. Maybe getting rid of some of them if they're a little too much. But trying to be selective with the areas that I add this to so it's not everywhere. There we go. Now it's starting to look like the sun is filtered through the trees because we're going to be adding some leaves later, so we want that look like it's coming through the leaves and hitting certain parts of the tree trunks, not all of them. And let's see, this would be more in shadow. Okay. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let's switch gears here. Let's put a little bit more of a highlight on this one right here. Okay. All right, so let's go back and add a little bit more of this color. I just want to make sure I've got this on here before I put all my leaves on there. So I'm still sticking with that white with yellow ochre. Just adding a few more little touches to really pop out a few spots. But again, you can kind of tell I'm being more selective with that at this point. So ultramarine blue with yellow ochre. Just kind of using that background color to establish some of my shapes, kind of using it as like a negative space thing. So using the color behind the trees to maybe get rid of some of the tree trunks that got a little too big, so you can paint right over them. All right, so let's do some primary yellow with alizarin crimson. So this is going to be pretty bright, which is what I want, and not a lot of water with it. So we're going with pretty opaque paint at the moment. So let's see. So this will be in sunlight, the parts of the trees that the sun is hitting. Let's go with a little bit more red. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, there we go. Because I do want to be able to go really bright later on, the last little bit of it, so I don't want to go too bright right away. This is much better. All right, so starting with this main area of leaves, it's kind of the biggest bulky area of leaves that we have. And starting on the sunlit part of it, which is to the right side of it. Now let's go over here and kind of cover up some of this tree trunk here. So if we look at our photo reference, we don't see every part of the tree trunks. We see little bits of it through the openings in the leaves. So kind of getting rid of some of that. Let's see, let's go with a little bit more yellow in the mix here. Too much red. Okay. There we are. So definitely taking the time to look at my subject matter and pick out the shapes that are the most prominent and the little areas that kind of capture my attention. Like these little leaves down here towards the bottom of our tree. They're catching the sunlight. And let's see, we'll do some over here. And a few little shapes off the side here. Just kind of bringing that off the picture plane just for composition. It's a little nicer that way. And let's add a little right here, kind of get rid of some of this tree trunk area. Starting to look a little more natural now that we've covered up some of the tree trunks. Maybe we'll get rid of a little bit over here. Same color this whole time though. Okay. So kind of didn't like that area, so I just covered it with leaves, which is definitely something you can do if you want. So let's go ahead and reestablish this tall area up here that I painted over with sky. But I'm using a smaller brush and being pretty light with the pressure so I get smaller shapes. Okay. We'll do a few over here. So letting some of that blue show between some of the brush strokes at the top parts of the trees so it looks like the leaves are kind of separated. They're not so thick up there. Put a few over here as well. Maybe there's a thicker spot right there. So definitely take your time. Make sure you're balancing the big shapes and the small shapes and the structure of your tree. All right, let's see. I'm liking that. Starting to look like a healthy sycamore tree. So there's also some little kind of leaves growing along the base of the tree trunks that are getting some sunlight hitting them, so I'm adding some of those right now, which is kind of a fun little detail to add in there. Maybe over here. And we'll add a little here as well. All right. Looking pretty good. Got a little bit more yellow in the mix here. And let's see. Let's go a little brighter. So I just added a little bit more yellow into the mixture. Same color, just more yellow. So a little bit of alizarin crimson, but mostly the primary yellow. So just brighten it up a little bit so we can get some other values happening. So this is the kind of developing the sun and shadow in the leaves. So this is the sunlit part of the leaves. Okay. So definitely paying attention to my brush strokes, kind of using like the corner of the flat brush so that it's not like a square every brush stroke you do. So by using the corner you get some interesting little spontaneous shapes that look kind of like leaves. Okay. We'll add a little sunlight down here on the right side. Maybe there's a little over here underneath the trees coming through from behind. All right, let's do a little more red in the mix now, and maybe a little bit of blue, the ultramarine blue. So I'm kind of making a shadow color for my leaves. I'll add a little bit of yellow ochre to it too. All right, so that looks pretty nice. So I wanted to get a nice dark color to make the highlights read properly. So kind of reestablishing where the shadows and the lights are. So working on my shadow areas right now. But letting some of those other colors we had before show through. I don't want to cover up everything. So some nice variations going. I just added a little bit more blue into the mix as I'm working, so that, again, just to have some nice variations so that it's not all the same. All right, starting to see that light pop by adding the shadow in there. Okay, looking pretty good. Maybe we'll add a little bit up here. So I don't want to overdo the shadows as you get closer to the top of the trees. Otherwise it just makes everything look a little heavy. But we definitely want a little bit of it up there, especially the areas with lots of leaves. Okay. Maybe a little more in the corner there. All right. That's looking pretty good. clean off my brush. And let's go ahead and mix up a nice green again. So this time we're going with the primary yellow and the primary blue, which is going to give us the brightest green that we can get from this palette. So a little more yellow, make it really bright. All right, so this will be my sunlit grass here. Just want to get that nice look of the sun kind of coming from behind and lighting everything up. It's such a pretty splash of color against the orange of the leaves. So we'll put a little down here as well. And let's go even brighter. We're going to go with a little more yellow and a little touch of white to make the brightest highlight we're going to get for our greenery, for our grassy areas. So this is the area that the sunlight is really hitting that grassy hillside there. Nice. And we'll do a little over here. Kind of thinking about grassy shapes as you're putting in your brush strokes here. So maybe there's some little vertical brush strokes, they're not all horizontal, to kind of indicate the way the grass grows and the way the bushes are over here in the corner. It's starting to look pretty good. All right, so clean brush, we are going to kind of go back to that purple color we had earlier. So the white with alizarin crimson and a little bit of ultramarine blue. So this is a nice color for that hillside in the background. Let's see, maybe a little more blue, a little more white. I'm kind of just mixing a little bit of each color until I get the exact hue that I'm looking for here. There we go, that's pretty good. Okay, so this is what I was going for. So I'm kind of adding some tree holes where you can see through the trees to the hillside in the background, that purple hill that we were talking about earlier. There we go. And again, definitely take your time. You don't want to overdo it or put it in the wrong spot where there might be a tree trunk is supposed to be there. So take your time. We will add a little bit more right here just to pop that color a little bit. And that looks pretty good. All right. Maybe just a little bit more right there. Okay. So let's go ahead and do a little ultramarine here and maybe add a little yellow ochre and probably should, yeah, a little more. Okay. So kind of going for a color for the road again. Actually, let's do this. This is actually perfect for our lower part of our hillside here. So like we were talking about earlier, the hillside's a little darker as it gets down towards the trees and the grassy area. So this color is perfect for the dark part of our hillside here. Okay. All right. Definitely taking my time to just search out all my shapes and make sure I'm happy with the spacing and all the colors here. So I kind of made emphasis on that tree trunk just a little bit by using the negative space to clear out some of the leaves around the tree trunk. Paint over some of them. Okay. It's looking pretty good. Let's put in some road here. So I was making the value just a little bit darker on the shadow parts of the road with thicker paint, less water. Now we'll make that highlight part of the road. So white, yellow ochre, alizarin crimson and a little bit of blue in there. And there we go. So I want to do this while the shadow part is wet so that we get some soft mixtures happening. So thinking about the sunlight coming from the right side, where it might be hitting the road. So going back and forth between the light and the shadow colors that we mixed up until I'm happy with my shapes here. Let's go back to kind of that darker purple color. So ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, and alizarin crimson. And I'll just add some kind of dark bushes, or maybe add a little bit more green to the tone here. So a little bit more yellow ochre in there. There we go. So it's kind of like bushes just behind our grassy area. Maybe some little oak trees or something in the distance there. Just to give it a little bit of separation between the grassy area and the purple hill in the distance, which is actually there in the photo reference. You can see there's some plants and things like that there. All right, so yellow ochre with ultramarine blue. Maybe a little bit of water, and we'll just add some kind of like highlight type shapes to that so it's not too distracting of a dark shape back there. I'm kind of toning it down just a little bit. Blend it a little so it's a little softer. All right, that looks pretty good. So primary blue with primary yellow. We're going pretty bright here and really pop out that grassy hill. So I'm pretty happy with this painting. I think we've captured the feeling of a fall day. So I'm gonna leave it there. And I hope you guys enjoyed painting along with me today. Definitely post your pictures on the member social forum. I want to check those out. And I will see you guys next time.